Hello, and thank you for joining us at Therapy Chat with Phoenix Behavioral Health. I'm your host, Dr. Parks, and with me I have Christine DesLauriers, a licensed therapist and addictions substance abuse specialist. And today we're going to be talking about couples counseling. We've spent a lot of time up to now talking more about individual therapy, but we see more and more a demand for therapy for marital counseling. And so we thought it would be a good idea to talk about that a little bit, because often people, they may have had a bad experience, so they may feel, I think one of the biggest things that comes up is that people will say, I'm a little worried about going to couples therapy because I'm afraid it might be one-sided, that the therapist is going to side with either, with my partner. And so I always stress that, the role of the therapist is to be completely non-judgmental. We're not going to take anyone's side. Our main focus is to really be able to listen to what both individuals are saying about their situation, about their thoughts, about their feelings, about their marriage. And the main thing is to be able to give feedback. When we watch a couple interact, we can really give constructive feedback about body language, about tone of voice, about content, the way communication was delivered, etc. So that's our main role. And then second to that, we try to really focus on lots of different ways that the couple can start to work together. And in some cases, if they decide that they don't want to stay together, and most times there are children involved, the couples therapy can assist them in at least communicating better for the benefit of their children, if they do decide to separate. So, do you see a lot of couples in your day-to-day therapy?
I think I see a fair amount.
Okay.
I do see more individual than couples, but the couples are increasing, and I think COVID has certainly contributed to that. There are a lot of stresses on marital relationships or partnerships that weren't there a few years ago. And I will say that I do give couples a lot of kudos for taking the step to come in and address issues, because it's not easy. And in this day and age where I think relationships tend to be kind of disposable, I think it's really a wonderful thing when people really want to value the relationship and commit to it and work hard at whatever the weak points are or the stressful points are, and making it work. So I think that's a really great thing on both of the partners' parts, to commit to trying everything they can to keep the relationship, or especially the marriage if children are involved, together.
And there are times when we may recommend that one or both of the individuals perhaps seek one-on-one therapy to deal with it, maybe past trauma, their own issues that they need to talk about, so that in therapy the focus stays on the couple and what's going on, so we don't get sidetracked onto just focusing on one person. So a lot of times one-on-one therapy is recommended too, and very very helpful. So usually, well, actually always, there is the element of what we call homework. And that's really, really important, because, and this is the same in individual therapy, what we talk about in this session is just 45 minutes, 1 hour. But the real change happens in the application of what we've talked about on a day-to-day basis. So it's the same for couples. So typically, one of the main approach that I use is what's called BCT, or Behavioral Couples Therapy. And so every week there is something to focus on, some kind of a main objective that the couple can accomplish. And typically the first session we talk about is focusing on the positive. When the couple comes in for the first session, it's usually because there are lots of issues, that things are not working. So when we discuss at intake, what's going on, there's this that's not working, there's this, I'm angry with this, I'm disappointed with this. So despite the fact that there's all these perhaps negative things that are happening, we try to bring a little bit of focus on the positive that is still there. And so, the first week homework typically is that each client will take note of something the other person did that day that they appreciate. They don't say anything, they just note it down. So when they return for the second session, the first part involves each person talking about throughout the week what they noticed their partner did, number one, and number two, how they felt about it. So it might be, on Monday I noticed that you brought me back a coffee and I really felt that you cared about me. I really appreciated that. Thank you. And it's a really positive note to focus on, especially when there's all the things that are not working. So we are actively looking for the things that are working. And it can be fairly emotional, that second session, when each of them realize, oh, my partner noticed all my efforts, or on a daily basis. That's very, very powerful, and a very positive aspect of it.
One of the things that I also like to encourage couples to do is make some one-on-one time. Because often that is a big part of what's missing. Life is so busy and scheduled nowadays. People have, if they have children, they have a ton of after-school activities. Oftentimes work schedules are all opposite each other. People don't really have fun together anymore. So something as simple as sitting down and watching a movie together, eating dinner together, making a date night once a week. It doesn't have to be anything special, just something the two of you do, which could be going out to eat, or it could be just taking a walk together. Just time to kind of rekindle things, and when you're together, you're not to talk about all these problems and worries. You're just to enjoy each other for that, 20 minutes, half hour, and that can help revive things in a relationship.
I think that's a really, really important point, and in fact, it's one of the homeworks that are given. So I try to encourage for both clients that they can equally lead and follow. And a lot of relationships, there's the primary leader, the one who makes all the decisions, the one who's checking on the reservations, doing this, doing that. They're kind of doing all the work, and then the other person is the follower. It may be that they feel that, I'm really easygoing, I don't mind what you do, so I'll go with whatever. But in fact, that puts a lot of, that can put a lot of weight on the leader, because if anything goes wrong, it's always the leader's fault. And it puts a lot of responsibility. So when we're working on this, each person becomes the leader, has a turn at being the leader, but also the follower. So both individuals will come up with an activity, and it doesn't have to be a major activity. It could be just, I'm going to try out Chinese or Indian cuisine tonight. This is what my night is that I want to organize. Someone else may say, it's going to be an outdoor activity. We're going to go to a barbecue, or we're going to go on a sunset cruise or something like that. The person who's arranging it is responsible for all of the details. So the reservations, what time to leave, and all of those things. And all they need to do is tell their partner, if it's an outdoor activity, for example, you need to wear a nice warm coat and hat, or something like that, because it's going to be cold. So they have an idea. And the follower, what they have to do is they have to commit to putting in 100% engagement, right? So it's not a time for them to complain. Why did you make me do this? I hate doing this, right? The focus is on just being able to follow in a very positive way. And then that flips, they switch roles for the next activity. So now each partner is equally comfortable leading and following, or giving and receiving. And that puts a nice balance in the relationship. Okay, and I'm sure you see this too. Almost always, a major thing is communication. Now, you must see that, right?
Yes, and I think one of the things that a therapist does as a guide in the therapy session is to point out dysfunctional patterns of communication. I see an awful lot of mind reading going on between couples, where someone assumes the other one is thinking this or has done something because of this, which may not even be true. But they go on that mind reading premise, and then that starts all sorts of anger, fights, when that may never have been the intention or at all. It might have been a misinterpretation often.
Yeah. So, along with the day one activity, which is actively looking for something positive that the other person does, another skill that we work on and we integrate into every session is the importance of communication, and we're starting with validation. So we do an in-session practice, and then ask that this is practiced between sessions. So with validation, it's really learning to completely listen to the other person without having your mind occupied with how you're going to defend yourself and how you're going to put the focus on it's your fault, and so therefore not listening. So with validation, this involves real what we call active listening, being non-judgmental, and having patience and tolerance. So it may be that my partner's telling me something, for example, when you leave your plate on the table, I get really irritated because I feel that you don't care about the fact that I'm tired and I've been busy all day. So what the issue is and how I feel about it, right? But then whereas normally the partner may say, no, I don't, you do that too, and continue on. The partner's job in validation is to say, oh, they want to make sure that they understood it. So when I leave stuff on the table and I don't clear it up, that doesn't bother you. No, I didn't say that. I said it does bother me. Oh, okay. So number one, if we're trying to increase or improve communications and we're trying to resolve issues, the number one thing is we first of all have to fully understand what the other person's saying. So in validation practice, it's just 5 minutes. It's very, very quick, but to be able to practice that on a daily basis really lays a good foundation for improving communications between the couple.
And I think the therapist can model that too, in terms of reflective listening that the therapist can do when the couple first comes in, hearing what the problems are and reflecting the problem back, making sure that they're, as a therapist, understanding it correctly and communicating it correctly, and validating the problem. And that's kind of, what you're speaking to, is everybody's got to hear each other.
And the big thing is, I mean, if we can do that by role modeling, that's probably the best way, because then the client's listening to how you're interacting with the other person, and you're actually showing how that's done in the process. What else about validation?
Well, I think you have to be grateful too. I think it's important to be grateful, to your partner. I mean, when people come in, they tend to be very focused on all the negative traits, all the negative habits, all the negative interactions, and those, those are happening. But there's also good things that are happening in the relationship that aren't being focused on at all, because we're hyper focused on the negative. So. Being grateful is a chance to let's look at all the things. Okay, so they aren't cleaning up the dishes after dinner, and that's infuriating you. But what are some of the other things they are doing in the relationship that are showing that they care about you? And we tend to dismiss those or not focus on them, and those need to be brought to the forefront too, to balance it out.
The other part of the communication is the nonverbal, which is such a big part of the communication. So it's not just what a person's saying, but it's their speed of delivery, their pitch of voice, their modulation of voice, whether their body's relaxed or leaning forward or tense. And when a couple is engaging in a lot of negative non-verbal communication, they often don't even realize that that's what they're doing. I mean, the partner may be saying, well, why are you shouting? Why do you sound so angry? And the other person says, no, I'm not. And they really don't realize they are. So when you're in session and you can encourage, after the first, 2 sessions or so, encourage the couple to talk about an issue that's bothering them, and then watch how the body language changes, and you can intervene. You can say, I did notice that you were clenching your fists at one point, or you started to speak really fast and your voice went up higher. And so help the individuals notice that. That can go a long way too, because then they can learn to become more aware of that. Right. In fact, a lot of time we work on grounding at the beginning of the session. So some people have never heard of that or don't know how to do that. So we'll do perhaps a 5-minute relaxation, physically, mentally. And then we start to communicate, and then the couple often sees that they'll say, my partner seems much more relaxed. So we don't go into defensive mode.
So I was going to say, sometimes you can also do an exercise where you ask them to make a list of things they want from their partner.
Yes.
And that can be interesting.
Very much, because that's one of the sessions that we do. It's actually called "How Can We Meet Each Other's Needs," and it can be really kind of enlightening, informative. Each person will write down, what am I doing to enhance the relationship? What's my partner doing to enhance the relationship? And then question 3 is, what do I need to kind of work on? What do I think I need to work on to enhance the relationship? and what do I feel my partner needs to work on, right? And then each person talks about their answers, and sometimes you get really surprising results. I mean, sometimes a person cannot identify anything that they do to enhance the relationship because they feel bad about themselves. You know, my partner does everything and I don't bring anything to the relationship, you know. And sometimes a person will say, you know, I think if my partner worked on this, that would be really helpful. And sometimes the partner is totally confused. I was never even aware of that. And other times they are. But it gives a lot of information for the couple to start addressing, working on, you know. Yeah. Another very important area is, and this comes a little bit later when couples have learned to self-regulate a little bit better and not be in defensive mode, is problem solving. You know? So, you know, I think fundamentally the purpose in couples therapy is to say, okay, there's an issue, right? Whatever identify, if it's an issue for me, then it's for both of us because it's a couple. And identify the issue. This issue can be a problem that collapses our relationship or our marriage. Or it can be an opportunity for us to work together to actually get closer, right? To strengthen our relationship. So when each person is identifying what they feel is a problem, we'll make a list that we eventually, you know, we look at all of the things that are listed. But we'll take problem number one, for example, and we'll look at how we can work as a team to solve. What do you think? How do you feel? This is what I think. This is what I feel, in a very non-judgmental way. So we can make a plan to try to address the problem, right? Rather than saying it's your fault, why you cause so many problems? So it's all very one-sided, you know. But I think the number one thing is that when a couple comes in for therapy, they have to really realize that they're doing the work. And so as much as you want to perhaps address all of these different issues each week, if nothing's being done between sessions, the couple's not going to see much progress.
And both partners have to do the work.
Yeah.
Because you will sometimes see one partner doing all the work in the session and the other partner's not. And that has to be addressed too, because that means only one person's invested. It's a one-way street, and that's not going to work in the long run.
And, you know, and we touched on it earlier, you know, as far as, I'm not saying contraindications, but things that might block the therapy. One, you know, if a person or even both persons are dealing with a lot of unresolved trauma, it's really important, because if it's unresolved trauma, it's going to be acted out in the relationship. So, you know, the idea of doing one-on-one therapy to work on that is really important.
Or substance abuse issues.
Substance abuse issues too. It's hard because otherwise, you know, you're not a couple, you're a threesome, because it's you, and the drug or the alcohol. And so that has to be addressed for them to move forward. I mean, that's all the time we have for in this session. But if you would like any more information on couples therapy, or any information about what we were talking about in general, you could check in phoenixinfo.online or give us a call at 508-623-3931. And thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to meeting with you next week. Thank you.